Starfox, or Starwing as it's known here in the PAL regions, is a 3D rail shooter game developed by Nintendo and Argonaut Software. It's the very first game in the Starfox series, and it follows Fox McCloud and the rest of the Starfox team as they defend their homeworld of Corneria against the invading forces of Andros. Now this is a game that I'm really glad to have in my collection. When I started recollecting SNES games about 7 or 8 years ago, I knew that Starwing was one of the first games I was going to have to get. To get the cartridge is easy enough. I've seen it for less than £10 online and in store on some occasions, but to get the box is a lot more difficult. So again, I am really glad to have this. Looking more closely at the box, Starwing, obviously it's the PAL version, revolutionary, Super FX, microchip. So what they mean by this was that this was Nintendo's first ever game to use polygon graphics. And it accomplished this by being the first ever game to use the Super FX graphics accelerator coprocessor powered GSU. I'm reading that right off of Wikipedia. So pretty much the cartridge has a built-in coprocessor, which allows the SNES to process these polygon graphics, which wasn't actually built into consoles until the later generation. Now I've really been looking forward to playing this game. It just happens to be the game that I played the most as a kid on the SNES. But as I stated last week, I'm going to try not let nostalgia affect my opinion whilst making these reviews. So, without further ado, let's get started. So right off the bat, this game just blew people away before they even started playing. So you have to remind yourself that this was 1993, the date of my birth, when console gaming was very primitive. And although big arcade cabinets back then were able to push the boundaries, on a console like the SNES to have a game looking like this was just groundbreaking. I think many modern eyes might not appreciate this game as much as it deserves, and the methods the developers took to achieve this. To fill you in with the plot, this game takes place in the fictional solar system called the Lilith system, which is inhabited by animal species such as foxes, birds, frogs, rabbits and apes. It contains the planets Corneria and Venom representing the good and evil. Respectively, Andros, an evil scientist, fled to the planet Venom after being banished from Corneria, and declared war on the latter, unleashing an enormous army to wreak havoc on the Lilith system. General Pepper, the commanding officer of Corneria's defence force, dispatches a prototype high-performance fighter aircraft called the R-Wing. However, lacking the time to train pilots for his new aircraft, he summons the elite mercenary team Starfox to defeat Andros. Fox McCloud, the leader of the team, is accompanied by his teammates Falco, Pepe and Slippy. Now as a kid, when I first discovered this game sitting on a shelf in my old parents' house, it was like a dream come true. Growing up surrounded and immersed by Star Wars and Star Trek, finally being able to take control of your own R-Wing, was just amazing back in the day. But now putting all that nostalgia aside, let's truly analyse this game with a neutral perspective. This is going to be very difficult because there really isn't a lot to hate about this game, but I have always found that even the best games always have their flaws. When replaying this game, the first issue I found, well, it isn't really an issue, it's just that it's not aged too well in some places. The R-Wings themselves, for example, are really lacking in any form of detail, as are many of the enemy ships and a lot of the clutter and objects that you have to manoeuvre through. It was always quite difficult to work out what a lot of these things were, and to be honest it's still very difficult to work out what a lot of these things are. The backgrounds in a lot of these earlier missions can also be lacking in any detail. Just the same mountain backdrop the whole way through here doesn't really give much identity and character to Corneria. The second issue with this game is definitely the frame rate. Now despite the age of these games, most SNES games run at a solid 60 or 30 frames per second. But sadly, Starwing rarely ever reaches 30 and usually seems to sit round about the mid-teens. Now of course this is to be expected, most SNES games are 2D side-scrollers and whatnot, whereas Starwing is a 3D polygon graphic game. But it has to be noted because of course a dodgy frame rate really impacts the gameplay here. And I guess the third issue that I have with this game is being that it's an on-rail shooter, it can be difficult to manoeuvre past a lot of obstacles. You sometimes feel like the tracks of the game are trying to pull you in a certain direction and it pulls you towards something you're really trying to avoid. I guess this is where that famous quote "do a barrel roll" comes in handy, but it can only do so much for you. And now on to the positives, and that's great because I've got so many good things to say about this game, even after replaying it in the modern day. And first of all, you've got the visuals, the soundtrack, and the sound effects. Now I know I said a lot of these polygon graphics looked a lot dated, as did some of the backgrounds, but once you get past the first level or two, I think this game just looks incredible at times. With stars and asteroids in the backgrounds, and friendly and enemy ships flying all around you, and blaster shots hurling towards your screen, this game is just incredible at creating a futuristic dogfighting atmosphere. And just listen to the sound effects and the soundtrack. Considering this game was out in 1993, I consider it to be top notch. And as you might have noticed, we picked up a weapon enhancement there, which I would consider to be another positive of this game. Your standard ship capabilities include being able to boost your thrusters, hold your brakes, use your blasters, your nova bombs, tilt to the side, and do a barrel roll. Nova bombs can be hard to come by and I feel like they should be a little bit more powerful, but you can also improve your blasters, change them to twin blasters, and even more powerful twin blasters. Now I guess the game can be short and you could complete the story technically in about 5 missions, but each of the 3 tracks to choose from are all filled with detailed missions. You can also pick up health buffs around the level, as well as invincibility shield buffs from time to time. And personally, I believe that it all balances out to make the game difficult, but really not too difficult. Another thing I really enjoy about this game, again touching on that atmosphere, is your allies. Although your 3 friends don't really help out too much, I really feel like they add to the experience. Sometimes they'll be in need of help, and if you do help them they'll thank you, and other times they'll be after a ship, but if you shoot it down, they usually get annoyed. They all have their own health bars, and if you don't help them enough they can be destroyed and they don't come back after that. It's actually quite a shame when you reach the end of a level and you get your summary and one of your friends has been killed. The obstacles in this game can also be very enjoyable. You can fly inside a bigger ship, dodge what's in your way, and then blow it up from the inside. You can just tell that the developers took a lot of influence from the likes of Star Wars. So overall, I believe that Starwing is an excellent game, but it does have its flaws. You can't really hide that the poly graphics have become somewhat dated. The R-Wing itself, the enemy ships, and some of the backgrounds of the earlier missions just look a bit dull at times. And then of course there's the frames per second. It must have been a challenge to get this game to run properly on the SNES. But of course the sacrifices impact the gameplay. It can be difficult to manoeuvre through obstacles when the frames drop. And speaking of manoeuvring, considering this is an on-rail shooter, sometimes I feel like the game pulls you towards obstacles when you're trying to dodge them. And one final thing, I said very little about the bosses of this game, one reason being that I don't like to spoil, but the second being that they're just a bit of a hit or a miss. Some are excellent, very memorable, but others are just forgettable. But despite these flaws, there's so many good things that outweigh the bad, such as the incredible immersive atmosphere helped with the brilliant sound effects and soundtrack. I find that the R-Wing capabilities and the weapon enhancements make the gameplay very fair in terms of difficulty. And finally your allies, the little things that add a lot of personality to the game. Being able to help or abandon your teammates and their reactions to your actions just adds a little bit more to the game. So with all that taken into account, with nostalgia taken a step to the side, I'd give Starwing 4 stars out of 5. If you are new to the channel, please feel free to like, subscribe, or you can even follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I do plan on continuing on with as many of these Super Nintendo games as possible. So until next time, see you later.